Hello everybody, it's Christina and welcome back to my library. This is my October wrap-up. I am really impressed with the number of books that I read in the month of October. I actually managed to read 10 books, which is a whole hacking lot for me. Normally I can do like 4 or 5 a month, and I did 10 this month. So more than double what I normally do. And then last month I did 8. So like I'm on a roll with reading. I'm just going to keep going with this. But I wanted to talk about the books that I read in the month of October. And like I said, there's quite a few. So let's get started with them. All of them are like mystery, thrillers, horror novels. I was in a very big, like dark and spooky mood for October. Kind of starting to wind down with that now, but I'm pretty sure, and well, one of them wasn't. One of them was like a dystopian, but anyway, let's get started. The first book I read in the month of October is Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. I absolutely loved this book. It was so dark, it was so atmospheric, it was so spooky, and the whole story, it was so creepy and so weird, and I really liked this. You follow the story of a girl, I don't know if I'm going to say her name right, Noemi? I think it's Noemi. You follow the story of Noemi. She's going to try and visit her cousin who got married to an Englishman that lives in this kind of big manor house in Mexico or outside of Mexico City. And she's trying to figure out why her cousin hasn't been responding to her letters. And so she goes there to check up on her, and all sorts of creepy, spooky things ensue. I absolutely loved this. I gave it 5 stars on Goodreads, and it was the perfect way to start off my spooky reading binge in October. I absolutely loved this. It was so good. Next up is a book that I don't have a physical copy for. I actually ended up listening to it on audiobook, and that is White Knight by Jim Butcher. This book, as per usual with all of Jim Butcher's later books, anything after book 3 in the Dresden Files has been a 5-star for me. This one was no exception. I absolutely loved it. It's read by James Marsters, who I believe is Spike on Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel. So he does an amazing job narrating this book. He does such a good job, and it's so enjoyable to listen to. I think I listened to this audiobook in like 3 days. It was so good. This one, again, I can't talk too much about Dresden Files because this was the 9th book in the series, so we're like way into spoiler territory now. I can't really even talk about characters that are involved because it could be spoilers for earlier books, but just know I absolutely loved it. It was 5 stars, and it just continues this really amazing story of Harry Dresden, and you can really tell that there is this underlying like mystery that kind of encapsulates the whole series. It's not just an episodic book where you're, seeing different mysteries play out over the course of one book. There is like an overarching mystery or over the whole series. And I'm still trying to figure out like what exactly is going on with that, but I'm sure it'll be revealed eventually. And it's so good. I love it so much. Next up is another book that I don't have a physical copy of because I borrowed it from my library and have already returned it. And that is The Shining by Stephen King. Y'all, I need to stop reading Stephen King's earlier work. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I don't like Stephen King's earlier work. I've tried it, I've tried The Stand, I've tried something else. Obviously, I tried The Shining. The Shining did not do it for me. I think I gave it maybe 2 or 3 stars. I can't remember. I gave The Stand 3 stars. It was probably the best of the 3, but I still didn't love it. And then Shining, I unfortunately gave 1 star too. I wanted to love this one so much because it was, that setting that I was looking for. Instead of a creepy manor, it was a creepy hotel, but it had that same vibe to it. I just don't like Stephen King's earlier works. And I know that kind of puts me in this like uncommon or unpopular opinion category. I actually really like his newer stuff. I loved The Institute, and I really liked 11/22/63. I didn't love any of his older stuff. I don't know what it is. In The Shining, you're following the story of a family that is heading out to this hotel to stay for the winter because the father got a job as like the winter caretaker for the hotel when it's all shut down. And you can see as time goes on, things start getting kind of weird, very spooky, very creepy. Things start happening to the father. The kid has these visions, and I finally know why it's called The Shining. I actually never knew that before. But again, I think the problem that I have with Stephen King, and he does get better with this, I think, as time goes on. I would say his newer novels don't suffer from this as much, but I hate how he ends his works. I didn't like the ending to The Stand. In fact, I hated it. If that ending wasn't there, I would have loved that book. Probably. It would have been at least 4 stars. I didn't like the ending for at all. And then The Shining, same thing. Didn't like the ending. I don't know what it is. I feel like Stephen King can write really good, creepy books, but then the ending just ruins it. And this one was no different. It was 1 star for me. I ended up DNFing it, but I did skim to the end to find out like what was happening with it. And I was like, what? Really? It wasn't for me. Next is another Silvia Moreno Garcia book, which again, I don't have a physical copy of. I actually ended up getting it on my Kindle. This is Certain Dark Things. And again, Silvia Moreno Garcia. Unfortunately, I didn't love this one as much as Mexican Gothic. I absolutely loved Mexican Gothic. This one I was just kind of okay with. And again, it comes back to a very lackluster ending. The story itself was okay. I did feel like the characters fell a little flat. But in this story, you're following a vampire named Adele, and she's trying to escape after her family has been murdered by another group of vampires or another race of vampires. She's part of and I cannot pronounce it, is a type of Aztec vampire. I'm going to put the name of it down like under like right here. I cannot for the life of me pronounce this. I have no idea how to say it. I don't even know how I said it in my head, but it's just not happening. So she's that type of vampire, and her family was murdered by the Necros race of vampire, and they're like the European type of vampire, and they're basically like starting to take over Mexico. And so she's trying to escape because Mexico City is not like a friendly place for vampires, and she meets this boy named Domingo. He helps her out, and she's basically just trying to get away from the Necros vampires. But you're following a couple of perspectives in this book, and I just was very disappointed in the ending for several reasons that I can't get into because spoilers, but it just didn't end how it was kind of leading up to. It felt very abrupt, and it just kind of went in a direction that I didn't really like. So therefore, I gave it 3 stars out of 5. It was still fine. Like I said, the beginning of the story was great. And like everything up to the ending was very interesting, and I was really curious as to what was happening. Like I said, the characters did fall a little flat, but I did like it until the ending, and that's why it brought it down to 3 stars. But it was still a pretty decent read. Next up is probably the weirdest book I have ever read in my entire life, and it is called The Library at Mount Char by Scott Hawkins. Again, I don't have the copy of it. It was a library book, but then I ended up getting it on Hoopla as an audiobook. Whew. This book was so bizarre. I couldn't explain this book to you even if I tried. It is a horror book. It's definitely gruesome. It's definitely gory. I would say it's maybe not quite that spooky. It's more of a gory horror book. I honestly can't even describe it to you. It's multiple perspectives. You're following several different perspectives of these people that were essentially raised in a cult, and you kind of follow their lives. Sometimes you're even following the perspective of a lion. I can't. I have no way to describe this book. It was bizarre. And the ending was very bizarre. The whole thing was just bizarre. I don't have any other way to say it. It was just a weird book. It was okay. I gave it 3 stars, but I feel like I had such a hard time following what was going on that I really didn't understand the story that well, and that's why it didn't get above a 3 for me. It was interesting. It was definitely interesting, but I don't really have any other way to describe this book. Next up is a thriller, and again, no physical copy, returned it to the library already, but that is Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn. And this one was pretty good. I've read a few Gillian Flynn novels at this point. I've read Dark Places and I've read Gone Girl. I loved Dark Places. That one I really enjoyed. Didn't like Gone Girl as much as I had thought I would. I know a lot of people really like that one. That one was not my favorite. And then Sharp Objects was honestly decent. I gave it 4 stars out of 5 on Goodreads. And it definitely was a super fast read. I think I read it in 2 days. And it went very fast. I was enthralled the entire time. I had so many theories going into it as to what was happening, and I ended up being completely wrong. So, yay. I love it when I can be surprised by a book like that. So, yeah, this one was very good. You follow the story of a woman who is a reporter, and she's going back to her hometown to cover the disappearance and murder of 2 young girls. And it's basically her also kind of confronting her past with her mother, who she's got a very strained relationship with. And she's also got a half-sister who she doesn't really know, so she's trying to get to know her. And she lives in a giant, creepy mansion. Perfect. So, yeah, it was good. I can't, again, say too much because it is a thriller, and I don't want to give away too much, but it was an enjoyable, fast read, and one of my favorites of Gillian Flynn's. Okay, we are finally back to the physical books, and this is Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. I think I'm saying it right this time. Yay. This is a library book. I've actually got to return this today, so I'm trying to knock this video out before I have to go and do that. I love this book. This is actually the second time I've read it. And this one, the reason I decided to read it this month, this was not originally on my TBR, but the reason I read it is because I had just finished watching Squid Game, and I loved Squid Game. So I needed something that was similar to Squid Game, where like people go into this contest, but people start to die, and this fit the bill perfectly. I love Gideon the Ninth. It is about lesbian necromancers in space. It's amazing. It's so good. And so basically you're following the story of Gideon and her necromancer, Harrow Hark, and they're going to this contest to decide who's going to be the next lictor of the Emperor. And I guess the lictor is like the main necromancers that help the Emperor out. And when they get to this contest, people start to die. They don't know if they're supposed to be doing that, but they are. And they have to start figuring out like what happened, and more people kind of just start dropping, and there's a romance, very LGBTQ plus friendly. I really loved this book. Gideon is fantastic. She's so funny. She had me laughing in places where I probably shouldn't have been laughing, but she was great. I loved Harrow, and I'm really excited to read the next book, which is Harrow the Ninth. And I'm hoping to get to that soon. Not November, because I'm kind of in a fantasy mood for November, but maybe December I'll get to Harrow the Ninth. And I know that there's another one coming out at some point, so I want to look into that as well. But yeah, this was fantastic. It was a second read. I've given it 5 stars twice now, and I can't wait for Harrow the Ninth as well. I probably should have done all of the non-physical copies at once, but I didn't. That's okay. The next one is another one that I don't have a physical copy for because it was an audio library book, and that is The Sweetness at the Bottom of the Pie by Alan Bradley. This is a mystery, and this one is kind of reminiscent of Nancy Drew, except it's written for a more adult audience than what Nancy Drew is written for. Nancy Drew tends to be more middle grade. This one is definitely more for adults. You do still follow a young girl. Her name is Flavia DeLuce, and I believe she is 11. And she lives in this, again, creepy Gothic manor. It's perfect for this time of year. And she discovers a body and is basically thrust into this whole mystery of what happened to this person, how did it get there, who did it. It was very good. Flavia is probably one of my new all-time favorite characters. I love her so much. She's so precocious, and like she kind of reminds me of my 9-year-old son if he was into murder and chemistry and poison, which he's not, but he's also very precocious, so I could see like I saw a lot of his personality in her, and I think that's why I loved her so much. She was just so funny. And I loved her point of view in this entire book. Even though it was about a murder, the point of view of a kid in this book was just great. It takes place in the 1950s, but yeah, she's so precocious and wonderful. I gave this book a 4 stars, mainly because as much as I love Flavia, the story did kind of drag in places, but I hear that it gets a lot better. This is a series. I'm going to continue it at some point. But yeah, absolutely love Flavia. She is a gem. The next book that I have on my list is the only non-mystery slash horror slash thriller book in the list, and that is Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. This one is more of a dystopian, and you're following the story of Wade, who found out that like the person that he looks up to the most, who invented this kind of like virtual reality place called Oasis, has died, and he left this Easter egg within the Oasis for people to find, but it's supposed to be very well hidden and nobody can find it. There's clues. It's taken 5 years and nobody has been able to find it, and Wade ends up being the first to find it. And it kind of just covers the story of that. This one, this was not on my TBR as well. The reason I read this is, again, because of Squid Game. It had that same, like, Willy Wonka goes wrong kind of a thing to it. So I thought that this one would kind of scratch the same itch that Squid Game and Gideon the Ninth did. Unfortunately, I did not love this. The story was intriguing, and I did love all of the video game and 80s references. However, I hated Wade. I hated this man so much. He was everything that I dislike about, like, gatekeeping people within video games. Like, he was clearly, like, you know that story of, like, the woman that goes into the video game store and then is, like, grilled on how many characters she has in a certain game because, you know, she's a woman, so she couldn't possibly play video games. That's the vibe that Wade gives off, and I hated him. I absolutely hated him. So, he brought this book down for me. I feel like if it had been written from anyone else's perspective, I would have loved this book because, again, I really liked the references, but Wade ruined it. He was just the worst. He was the worst. He was gatekeeping, and he kind of low-key stalked a woman in the game. Like, she just wanted to be friends with him, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. So he'd show up at, like, her Oasis, like, house, like, because they have houses within this Oasis place, and he would, like, show up there and play songs to her, and it was like, dude, no, stop. Don't do that. And it just, he creeped me out. I didn't like him. And he ruined it for me. So this got 3 stars. I don't intend to read Ready Player 2. I've heard absolutely nothing good about it. So yeah, I'm kind of done. It sort of scratched the Squid Game itch, but at the same time, I don't ever want to read about Wade Watts ever again in my entire life. And finally, the last book that I read in October was the one that I was saving for right around Halloween because I felt like it would be the perfect for the aesthetic and the vibes and the spookiness, and that is Dracula by Bram Stoker. This is a much-loved classic horror novel about people that have run into a vampire named Dracula, and it talks about how they are trying to defeat him, and it covers like various victims of his. I really liked this. This was actually on my 5-star TBR predictions. Unfortunately, it didn't quite get 5 stars for me because of various ways that women were referred to in this book. I know this was written in 1897, so that's why I still gave it 4 stars, and I didn't give it 1 or 2 stars because I was insulted. If this had been written in 2021, I would have been insulted and I would have put it down and said, no, thank you. This book was written in 1897, so I gave it some leeway. I still loved it. I still loved the creepy vibes. I loved the setting. The setting was amazing. The only issue I had was how they wrote women in this book. They were constantly referred to as little girls, little miss. It was degrading. I mean, I know that back then maybe that wasn't the case, but in this day and age, yeah, So I didn't love that. I kind of wish the women had more of a role to play in this book, because the two that you read about are not really like the heroes of the story. And yeah, that was my only real problem with it. The story was great. The setting was great. Everything else about this book was absolutely fantastic, and I loved it, and I definitely want to read more classic Gothic horror. I know there's tons out there. I actually got a request or a suggestion on Instagram to read The Haunting at Hill House, so I'm going to do that at some point. But yeah, this was a good book to round out my October reading. I really enjoyed it, and I am looking forward to reading more classic horror for sure. That wraps up my, no, not November, my October wrap up. Like I said, I read a lot of really good books this month. I'm very happy with what I was able to read. What did you read in October? Let me know in the comments down below. I would love to hear anything that you read and enjoyed and didn't enjoy. Let me know if you have any suggestions for classic/Gothic horror that I can read, because I really love that subgenre. So let me know. I would love to hear your suggestions. Don't forget, you can follow me on social media. I have links for those down in the description box below. You can become a channel member or a fan house sub, which is an optional money subscription that you can do. Again, completely optional, just helps to support the channel. And I have links for those down below as well. And yeah, hopefully you all have a great day, and I will see you next time. Bye!